When I was challenged by not knowing if I could do something, he kept telling me, Larry, you've always got the freedom to fail. Well, the freedom to fail causes you to want to work toward your goal. And it was a freedom that you may not meet it, but you're coming close to it if you just work on it. But at the bottom of that yellow pad, I wrote down that day, you've got the freedom to fail.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another enlightening episode of Mirror Talk Soulful Conversations. Today, we are joined by a guest whose life and legacy are shining testimony of what it means to live on purpose and steward well what has been entrusted to us. He has spent over 50 years empowering life and faith-based leaders across the world, guiding them in intentional living, wise giving, and purpose-driven leadership. He is the author of Intentional Living and Giving, a powerful book that invites us all into a lifestyle of generosity, clarity, and divine stewardship. Today, we'll explore how to thrive in a confused world, how to walk out of fear into freedom, and how to live as authorized, wise, wealthy distributors for the sake of our better world. Welcome to the show, Larry. How are you doing?
Hello there, Hal. It's good to be with you today, Tobi. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for Soulful Conversation. I'm looking so much forward to learning from you, learning so much about, how to become authorized wealth distributors in the world, to, lead from a place of purpose, and also how to live intentional life. But before we go into getting to, learn all of this, I would like us to play a game of wild card. Before we start
I'm ready
recording,
for your
you
wild
said,
card.
yes, exactly. Before you start recording, you said you're ready for the wild card. So right now I'm just trying to shuffle through the first stack of cards, and I'm going to pick a card randomly, and I'll get to ask you a question from the first stack of card. I don't know what question I'll ask you. Oh, okay. So the first question is, what would you honestly rate yourself 1 to 10, and why? So one being this.
What would I rate myself?
Yes, from 1 to 10. 10 being the best absolute perfection, and 1 being, the lowest.
Well, because I'm a child of the King and I'm a good steward, I'm going to rate myself at 4.5.
A 4.5? Okay, why? Why would you give yourself a 4.5?
Well, I think 5. I mean, we're all, I guess in spiritual terms, we've got sinful natures. So there's some stuff that does creep into our life, but I think I'm living a pretty victorious life every single day. Based on what life has done for me and what I'm doing and my commitments, I'll give myself a higher rating maybe than some people would be. In fact, I'm wanting many people to get up to 4.5 to 5 with me. So we'll talk about that. Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'm looking forward to digging deep into that in the course of this conversation. But that's very humble. That shows the humility part of yourself. There's a lot. I'm not perfect. There's a lot of flaws in me. 4.5. Yeah. Are you ready for the next question?
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So this is level 2, confessions. And the question is, what is something you would be judged for if people knew?
What would be I charged? What would I be charged for?
Judged for. If people knew about this, Larry, now you get to be judged for it if you confess on this show right now. I won't judge you, but maybe people will judge you. Maybe listeners out there will judge you.
Well, there's probably a few times when I go over the speed limit here in California. I guess I'm guilty. I'm guilty of pushing the limits a little bit at times. So I'm guilty.
I mean, who's not guilty of that? I don't know.
Yeah. I have no major crimes behind me, so don't worry about that.
Oh, yeah. In this day and age, that's a big achievement, I would say. Are you ready for the last card? I picked a card already. Wow. So this is our getting deep level, and it says, describe your worst heartbreak. What did it teach you?
Well, probably a decade ago was the heartbreak. My wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. We've been married 45 years when she transferred addresses. She just moved addresses. So, I don't think of her as being gone. I just think her moving to a different place because our scriptural foundation says eternity waits us all. And so she moved into a different location. But the heartbreak was watching her go through 18 suffering. A glioblastoma brain tumor is one of the most lethal. In fact, if you look it up in a dictionary or go to a website, a medical website, the first thing you're going to see on 2 of the major ones, I went to 2 of the larger, most reputable names when I first heard of a glioblastoma brain tumor, I had no idea what it was. And I decided that night I'd go home and I would look it up so I'd have more intelligence of talking with the doctor the following day.
Mm.
And I looked it up, and on both websites, Mayo Clinic and John Hopkins University websites, the first paragraph is, this terminal disease is treated in the following ways. And so when you realize you're dealing with terminal, that could be anywhere from 3 months to 10 years, because it's got a wide span of what terminal means, but you will die of a glioblastoma. So a number of very famous people, they will often comment that so-and-so died of a brain tumor. Probably it was a glioblastoma. But yeah, she passed away. That was 10 years ago, and that was a regret. I'm sorry to see her go, but I also decided at that time that I was still living, and so I had work to do. And I chose not to spend my time thinking about what I lost, but looking to what I actually gained through that 45 years of marriage with my best friend. So that was probably the answer to the question in a real nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm happy that you used that experience, to, pick I won't say pick yourself up again, but you are using that experience right now to even help other people out there. Basically, you did not give up on life, but you are pushing on forward.
Yeah,
and being
absolutely. I think people get stuck in death. They can't forget. They have regrets. I don't have any regrets. If you'd call it a regret, I'm just sorry that she had to get a glioblastoma. I regret that she had to get the disease. But from the sense of what I lost, I didn't really lose anything. She just transferred addresses. And I'll catch up with her someday. So there's no big, I'm blessed and more prepared for life as a result of that experience. Because, when you live through something like that, you can help a lot of people that are going through pain. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Tobi, that's probably my answer right there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So I'd like us to go back to September of 1972. And I would like you to take us to that pivotal moment in your life, 1972. You mentioned that, your life changed dramatically in the year that follows, actually. So what was the spiritual or emotional turning point that sparked your lifelong journey into intentional giving and
Tobi,
living?
I think a lot of people think that life is a clear path. It should be an easy trip. I was into something I really enjoyed. I was creating actually music groups for a ministry here in the United States. I had a group in Europe traveling, a group in Asia traveling, and 5 groups here in the United States. And I was not the creator of every group, but I was the one that made it all happen. So they would come up with an idea of what this group could do, how it could accomplish it. And then I would get involved in, okay, how are we going to make this happen? And I produced albums for them. I was heading up their scheduling, figuring out what they were going to do and how they would use their time. And I was really enjoying that. I thought that was what I would do. I was trained and equipped in college as a speech, English, drama teacher, debate coach, theater arts, all that kind of stuff. And so it was using a lot of the skill package that I had developed. And then I heard one day in a large concert environment that my job had been actually replaced by the announcement of who was the new leader of all the groups. And so it was kind of an earth-shaking experience. I was not expecting it. Sometimes you get a left curve thrown at you, and this was my left curve. And it was about 90 days later, and I was just kind of wandering aimlessly thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? What I enjoy doing is gone. And it was the fall of August of 72 when I was asked to go see the vice president of the organization. And he explained to me when we got together, I brought one other guy with me that I'd met 15 minutes earlier with a very different background than mine, but we were both available. And so we went to see him. And he said, I got a problem, and I'd like to show you where my problem's at. He said, come to my bathroom. Now, you were in an office, and every office was a converted hotel room. So every office had a private bathroom. We walked into his bathroom, and he pulled back the shower curtain on the bathtub. And there were 28 boxes of pledge cards piled all the way to the ceiling behind his shower curtain. And he said, this commitment of $2 million is in all these boxes. It was made 90 days ago. It's not left my office since they were delivered here in June. And he said, I don't know if we can follow up and get anything out of this commitment, but could you two try to figure out how to follow up a pledge of $2 million? And if there's any way we can redeem the pledge, I would like to do that. And maybe you guys can help me do it. That was the introduction that day to what I learned to be what was called fundraising. And I took the 28 boxes, my friend and I took them out of the room, started opening boxes and looking at what we had. And we kept saying, what in the world did we get ourselves into? Now, his background was nuclear submarines out of the Navy. Mine was in speech and theater arts and all of that. I was, as an English major, I was good at writing. I was good at creating. He was good at technology. And he had already learned in the nuclear submarine business that there was one thing you could count on, and that is there's zero tolerance of mistakes. So here's an engineer and a speech major, English major, and the two of us had to figure out what we were going to do with roughly 80,000 pledge cards and 28 boxes worth about $2 million. And that was introducing us to a new subject that neither of us knew anything about. And back in the days of 1972, there was no handbook, there was no coaching, there was no consulting. It was kind of like everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes, trying to make things work. And we were in the same boat. And luckily, between our two skills and our tenacity, we started working on a plan to follow up that commitment. And with a year, we had raised, in addition to $2 million from that particular group. And we were just doing things a lot of times by our gut and our feel of what should happen, and then by networking with other people that had similar challenges. And we were very successful, so much so that success led us to raise more and more resources. And that I was not leading the organization, I was leading fund development. That's our fundraising. But Tobi, fundraising and fund development are two different animals. Fundraising is exchange happens. In other words, if I ask you for some money and I say, as a result of you giving money, I'm going to give you something else. So the exchange is you're going to get something from me. I'm going to get something from you, and we're both going to be happy. So if you're into promotion of nonprofits, you'll see a lot of this even today. For instance, if you're raising money for an animal shelter, you may give them a T-shirt as a result of their gift. Or you may give them a blanket if you're helping kids, or you may give them something else that they get. So there's always an exchange. That's what fundraising is a back and forth exchange. And I get something from you, you get something from me. But while we were successful, Tobi, in doing that, I felt like we were sometimes manipulating people. We were trying to use language. We were trying to use emotion. We were trying to do things. And we were successful in doing it. And I'm not saying that fundraising is sinful. I'm just saying it's hard work, and you're always trying to find what the exchange is. Even if you, in the United States, it's very common to do charity golf tournaments where they go out and play golf. Well, the people playing golf are not there for the mission. They're there to give you money and go play golf. It's not about what are you doing to accomplish an outcome. It's how can I play golf with a group of guys, and I'll give you $300 or I'll give you some money as a part of my commitment to play golf, and I'll write that off as a charitable gift. But it still is not about the mission. It's much more about playing golf. That's why you're doing it. Well, we had done a number of things, and we were seeing success in that area and good success. So I was invited to a meeting one day of people that were looking to how we raise significant funding for the ministry that I was working with. And I was the low man on the totem pole, if you can use that old term. I just was a guy in the room. I had nothing really to contribute. I was listening, and they wanted me there because I was working in that area of funding and I was being successful. But it wasn't because I was a leader, doing cartwheels and doing very fancy things out there in the market. Success was on my side, but I was pretty minor. And the consultants that were making the presentation that day had done what was called a feasibility study for the organization to see if they could raise very, very significant funding. Now, large amounts of money for the mission that was worldwide. It was 190 countries of the world, growing rapidly, having a worldwide impact. It's in virtually every country of the world even today. And they were saying that if we were to raise that kind of money, we needed to start teaching people that give what would be called lifestyle stewardship in their minds. And lifestyle stewardship, nobody knew what was meant by that. because the word stewardship historically kind of means, well, stewardship equals money, so this must be your money strategy. There was a proposal that they do this. There was a disagreement that we could not do that. We had too many other things to do. We just wanted to raise money. But the consultants were very firm. If you don't do this, you're going to create competition in what would be called the Christian marketplace. But if you teach people lifestyle stewardship, you're going to be opening up an abundance of giving for everybody. And rather than being competition now, you're helping everybody raise money. Well, there was back and forth. They didn't, the leaders did not feel like they could do something else like that. And then somebody in the room, I don't even remember who it was, but I remember somebody commenting, well, let's ask Larry to research what lifestyle stewardship is. And maybe there's something that we can consider there. Now, what I realized, Tobi, later is there was no follow-up to that question of me. I wrote down on my pad of paper, describe and figure out what lifestyle stewardship was. And I put it on a yellow pad. That's the only thing I wrote on the pad that day, except at the bottom of the page, because I had a mentor that was really being helpful to me in my past experience. And when I was challenged by not knowing if I could do something, he kept telling me, Larry, you've always got the freedom to fail. Well, the freedom to fail causes you to want to work toward your goal. And it was a freedom that you may not meet it, but you're coming close to it if you just work on it. But at the bottom of that yellow pad, I wrote down that day, you've got the freedom to fail. That was the only two things on the page. Well, at the conclusion of the meeting, nobody said, we're going to follow up with you, Larry. What are you going to learn about this? When can you have something to report? And about 8 weeks later, nobody had ever called me about the assignment they gave me. But I brought it together 5 or 6 of the guys that were working under me. They were my department leaders. And I said, we need to look into this and see if it might have something to do with how we do our job of fundraising. And we got into the understanding and a study of what biblical lifestyle stewardship is. Now, stewardship is not about money. That's the confusion that many people have had over the years. Stewardship is management, managing the affairs of somebody else. That's what the word itself means. A steward manages the affairs of somebody else. So if you're flying on an airplane, you run into a person that's called the steward. She doesn't own the airplane, or he doesn't own the airplane. He's hired by the airline to take care and manage during that flight the audience that's in that airplane to keep them calm, cool, and collective so they don't destroy the airplane and the airplane lands. And the pilots have got a different job. They're flying the plane, but the stewards are keeping the passengers calm, cool, and collected during the 2-hour, 3-hour, 6-hour, 9-hour flight. Those are stewards. Now, they act like they're restaurant attenders. They come and they serve you drinks and they give you peanuts or a snack or whatever it is. That's the outside look. But what they're doing is protecting the assets of the airlines. And in emergencies, they are trained to what to do in emergencies in the airplane. That's the steward's role. They are paid to steward the care of that airline through the flight time. Well, a steward, the term from the accounting point of view, was a steward was the one that was assigned to manage the financial affairs and the affairs of a state owner. So if you go back into the 16th, 15th centuries, you'd find stewards that worked for large landowners, and they managed all the financial books. They managed all the property on behalf of somebody else. So the somebody else became very critical. And I learned at that particular point through that study process, and we figured out 5 principles behind stewardship, lifestyle stewardship and how it worked, that we were stewards of the resources that God had entrusted to us. He gave it. He didn't give it away and walk away. He said, I'm going to entrust you with this, and I want you to do something with it. I want you to manage it well. And you'll find, even if you go into Old and New Testament scripture, a lot of illustrations of stewards doing their job in that context. So what we started to learn is there were 5 key foundational principles behind being a lifestyle steward. And as we studied it, we came up with the phrase, and we used it often, even today, and I have it around. It's called an authorized wealth distributor. You're authorized to give away God's wealth and resources to help the needs and impact the needs of others. You are a distributor. You're not an owner. So here in California, our conversation's happening. I have a house here. California calls it my house. It's in my name. And they charge me taxes to live here, and I've got to pay the bills to keep it up, and I got to take care of it. But I don't own the house. I'm a steward of the house. It's entrusted to me for a season, and it's my job to make sure that it's well taken care of. But I'm a steward. I've got a car in the garage of my house here. It's not my car. It's a SUV, but I am entrusted to take care of it. And so I have to get it maintained periodically. I have to do the things that keep that car running correctly. But it's not mine, even though the state of California says if we want to know where it's at, we're going to look you up. I'm assigned that responsibility. So a steward is one who is assigned responsibility on behalf of the owner to take care of something. And it was life transformational to all of us when we realized that we didn't own anything, that God owned it all. That's an Old Testament principle behind all of that. And then we started to understand what it meant to do that. And I'll tell you, Tobi, it revolutionized what we did as individuals. We changed our mind from fundraising and manipulating people to give money to individuals that wanted to be involved in the mission of the organization, not just in how we figured out how to talk to them or what emotional language we used or how we appealed. Yes, we had all those techniques working. We were not afraid of using those, but our mindset was now we are no longer trying to get you to be a donor. A donor is a person that goes in when you need to give blood and you get a needle in your arm and you sit still and you give blood. That's a donor. They extract blood from you and give you a sugar cube or a cookie as a gift because they want to renew your blood loss that you've taken on that time. That it was a life changer for us. We no longer saw our people that were giving as donors. We started seeing them as partners, and partners do this, Tobi. Partners join hands and they're equally involved in the mission just as much as the persons that are carrying out the mission. So when I give to a homeless shelter in my hometown here, I'm a partner with them financially because I'm helping them do what I want them to do to help meet the needs of people in the area that are in destitute shape, need food, need clothing, and so forth. I'm not just giving them money and walking away. I feel ownership of what they're doing because we're doing this. We are joining hands together, and I'm equally involved in that mission just as much as the executive director or the people that cook the food or do other things for the organization. That is a significant brain change, and that we were dealing with partners, and now we were no longer appealing to them, but we were inviting them to join hands with us to accomplish a mission. Now, there would be times when we would thank them with a little gift of some type. That's still appropriate because sometimes those little things around our house remind us of the organizations. There's place for that. But it was not a push to get the money, and my appeal to them was not a blanket or a t-shirt. My appeal to them was what the mission was. It totally transformed how we thought. And we began to raise much more resources because we were not focusing on the money. We were focusing on building the partnership. It was relational partnerships that we were creating. And that transformed a lot of what we did. So we started teaching people what we were learning. We would have seminars, and people would, executives and business people would come to our seminars, and we would teach them the principles that we were learning. And as we taught those principles, we were seeing lives transformed all over the place. And I remember one guy that came to the seminar. He had just sold his business, and he was quite wealthy. He'd done a very good job of selling it. And his goal was to come and help other executives experience spiritual renewal in their lives like he had. But he came to the seminar, and at the end of the seminar, he came up and he said, I came here with the intention of, now doing something fun. But he said, one thing I know I've done well over life is I know how to make money. I'm very good at organizing and making money and making things count. And he said, I sold my business to do one thing, but I'm realizing that what I sold my business was to do was to actually invest it in a new business, because I know I've been gifted to make money, and I will make more money and give it away because that's what I'm really good at. So he actually left the seminar, and within a couple of months, he launched a new business, totally unrelated to his old business. He wasn't trying to do a copycat. And he started a new business that was very successful for the next decade. And he gave almost everything that he made from that business to charities and missions that he believed in, because he said, this is what I'm really good at doing. So he was using the skill package that God had entrusted to him, and he was making a difference because it was not about the money. It was about using his skill package to accomplish a greater purpose. And about 10 years later, he sold that business and made a lot of more money. And then he told me one day as I saw him, he said, well, for 10 years, I've done this, and now I still want to go back and help executives renew their spiritual life. And I'm going to do that for my next few years of retirement. And so he got to do what he did, but he delayed it because he saw that what he should be doing was actually creating resources for what he believed in. Now, that was an authorized wealth distributor. He was authorized to make it and to give it away. And so, he was no longer surviving. He was thriving. He was having fun doing what he was doing well because he understood the lifestyle stewardship principles behind his motivation. So I was privileged over the years to help work with many people, introduce them to the concepts that we're talking about here. The concepts are very simple to understand. They're not complicated, but I don't think and many of them are going to say, oh, I already know that one. Well, yeah, but let's tie it to this one. There was really 5 principles behind the lifestyle steward. Number one, that God owned it all. Number one, he also was a generous God, so he wanted us to be as generous as him. So he said, I want to make you in my image, and I'm a generous person, so I want you to do what I do. There's a principle of asking. The asking is very critical to engaging people with what you're doing. Some months ago, I was speaking at a men's prayer breakfast, or kind of a gathering of men. It was a breakfast one morning, and I was speaking, and at the end of the meeting, there was probably 30 people there, something like that. And they dismissed the group, and almost everybody within 5 minutes was out of the room heading to do other things in life on that Saturday morning. And 2 guys were working around, picking up, cleaning up, doing all the things that would be janitorial work, getting the program closed down. And I thought, those 2 guys are probably frustrated that nobody stayed around to help. The guys that left never even factored into their brain that they should stay around because they were never asked. If the leader of the group had said, before you leave, could you spend 5 minutes with us and we'll bust the tables, we'll clean up, and we'll all be out of here with just in a few minutes. If people had been asked, everybody would have probably responded. So we need to be asking because it's a part of who we are. We can ask in prayer. We talk about that. But we can, asking people to help in the partnership is a part of doing life together. It's part of community. And if we don't ask, we're not going to receive. And if we're not receiving, our joy is not going to be full. And so part of it is asking. Now, the other key principle in there is understanding what we call the law of the harvest. In my backyard out here, right next to my backyard is a backyard that has a orange tree. It's the only orange tree in the neighborhood. And I've been a benefactor of that orange tree because it hangs over my property. And my neighbor has always said, anything that's on your side, you're welcome to. So I'm very interested in that orange tree. But to get an orange off of that tree takes 11 months. It starts to blossom in February or March of every year. And it's not until December or January of the following year that we get nice big oranges off that tree. The law of the harvest says it takes time for that tree to grow. And a few years ago, they stopped watering the tree correctly, and we about lost the tree because it wasn't being nurtured and taken care of. It wasn't being fertilized. And so I stepped in. I said, we're going to lose that tree if we don't start doing something differently. Here's what we should do. It needed to be pruned. It needed to be watered. It needed to be fertilized. The law of the harvest says take care of what's growing or you will not have a harvest. So the law of the harvest is watching and caring for from the time of preparing the land, the seed that's sown, getting rid of the weeds, the nurturing, everything that goes into harvesting. And the harvest then comes in at 100-fold or 50-fold. It's a multiplied harvest. You never plant a seed and get one seed back. You plant a seed and get a plant that produces seeds. So everything about the harvest has got to be watched for there. And it's not going to happen quickly. Nothing happens fast. In our cultures today, we want everything almost instant. So we want to go to a supermarket and we want to pick up milk. and we go to the dairy section of that supermarket and we grab butter and eggs and milk, and we leave the store and we want to go right home and use it. We never think about how much work it got to put that milk in there, the eggs in there, the butter in there, and all the things. So a lot of times our instantaneous thinking in our culture stops us from realizing that it takes time for the harvest to grow and produce. And that's exactly what this is all about. So the law of the harvest, and then there's the principle also, Tobi, is that abundant supply is really what God's after here. And he wants us to be abundant, and he wants us to have plenty to give. Generosity is the key word there. And so we do have those 5 principles: God's ownership, God's generosity in giving, God's teaching us to ask, God's law of the harvest, and then the generosity. And you bring that all together and you start to say, I believe all 5 of those things. That's where you become an authorized wealth distributor. So even in the book that I wrote, the first 9 chapters are digging into the details of what that all is made up to be, those 5 principles. And the latter part of the book is, now that you're an authorized wealth distributor, how do you live every day so that you're thriving rather than just surviving, so that you've got a mindset of being generous all the time and you're looking for how you help people. The name of the book is pretty important to me because the word intentional, living and giving is kind of big words. I think that's attractive, but the word intentional is very important. You need to be intentional in what you do. So every day, intentionality, when my wife died, and we talked about that 10 years ago, I said, okay, I'm here and she's no longer here. So I've got to decide what I'm going to do every day. And I decided to create, and I believe this very strongly, if it's not in writing, Tobi, it doesn't exist. Ideas in our brain are useless. But if you write it down, now you can begin to edit it. So I have right now 10 I wills, 10 things that I choose to do about every day. And I have about 12 commitments that I'm going to keep. Now, it's in writing, and every year I go back and I tweak. I've even changed some. I've changed the wording on some. I can play with those words. But when it's in writing, I'm also committed to those words. When it's in my brain as a wild idea, I probably am not committed to it, and I may never get it done. So as a good steward, I need to write things down, if nothing else, so I can edit them and make them better or change them. That's really up to the steward. But the point of it is, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist, so write it down. And then I think another thing the authorized wealth distributor gets into is they got to realize that life is not lived in Disneyland. And Disneyland is a dream place. When Walt Disney created Disneyland, and I live about 45 minutes from the original Disneyland, he wanted a perfect place that was not consistent with the world's view of what perfection was, because the world was a mess. And some years ago, I have a big tree in my front yard, and I had an arborist come to work on the tree and found out that he worked nights for over a decade at Disneyland, trimming trees in the dark. And I got to know him a little bit, and he said, Walt Disney never wanted a single plant to die. He never wanted a tree to look out of place. He said, we worked all night long when everything was closed to make Disneyland look perfect when the guests started coming into Disneyland. And he says, my job was to take care of all the trees at Disneyland. And he said at 10 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night, when everybody else was gone, we would move in with our equipment to make it perfect. But life is not perfect. Life is not living at Disneyland. Life has got bumps. It's got disappointments. When you ask me the question, the disappointment of life, I remember that distinctly because that was 10 years ago. I didn't really want my wife to die of a glioblastoma brain tumor. I didn't want to live through 18 months of what it took to watch her decline. But those were things that life gives to us. In my occupation, I probably have had 5 different jobs. You might say I've been fired 5 different times because I'm the kind of a person that I don't just quit things. I'm very committed to it. But if somebody moves me abruptly, then while you may not call it a firing, it's sure an abrupt move. Let's put it that way. It's those kind of experiences that caused me to grow more than ever. Even the glioblastoma journey that I went through with my wife caused me to grow in faith more than I probably would have grown any other way. So we need to look that life is full of curves and unexpected turns. When I talk about the anticipating curves, if you don't anticipate the curve, you're going to go off the road. Most traffic accidents in Germany or in Latin America, any place else you go, are happening because people got their mind off of the job of driving. I know on the Autobahn in Germany, you could drive very fast, but there's an expectation that you're trained to handle a fast car. And if you do not handle it correctly, you're going to have a disaster that's happening. So the curbs on the road is where you've got to keep your eye on the road and not keep your eye on your phone, or not keep your eye on a conversation, or not get caught up on a radio program and you lose track of what you're doing and driving. So intentionality is very important to this life of the steward. And I also believe there's another part of that, Tobi, and that is there's a spirit of gratitude. Some years ago, my father was about 92 and 93, and he was no longer able to drive. I would take him shopping every week. We would go to grocery stores, and one of the first things he would always do is he'd start a conversation with the people working in the grocery store. And he would say, "What's your attitude today?" And I think, oh man, here he goes embarrassing me again. He's starting these wild conversations. And he would say to the clerk or to the cashier, "You need to have the attitude of gratitude." He said, "That's going to get you through life." I think, my dad had an inferiority complex much of his life. He had very creative person, great things going on, but life was not easy. But he could have taken the life and seen it as all negative, but he took it as gratitude for just being here. And the attitude of gratitude made a great deal of difference to how he viewed his older years when he could no longer drive. He was dependent on me to do most of everything for him. And I think the attitude of gratitude is very key to this understanding, because the Authorized Wealth Distributor is thankful for the privilege of just moving God's stuff around. And if I can help you today, Tony, or people that are listening to our conversation, that's what it's all about. Can I help somebody else have the spirit of the Authorized Wealth Distributor, the spirit of the attitude of gratitude? And, we've already talked a little bit about the intentionality. I get up every morning and they tell me in my older age now to be sure and move my ankles a lot before I step out of bed. They said it's one of the key things to keep people from falling is they get a little bit of movement before they step out of bed. So I learned that, a year or so ago. And as I sit there moving my ankles for maybe 30 seconds and just kind of stretching my legs so that I've got strength in it, the issue comes up to, okay, what are you doing there? And I'm thinking, okay, Lord, today I choose to thrive. I'm not choosing to survive. Today I want to bless somebody else. Who do I'm supposed to bless? What podcast or what email am I supposed to do? What phone call am I supposed to have? And I know every day is a day of joy, not a day of disappointment. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to not find disappointment through the day, but my attitude of going into that to help you succeed or your listeners succeed means that I am fulfilling what I'm really good at. And so I've been empowered and entrusted today with my life for the day to help an audience, to help other people succeed. Now, I believe there's a real strong spiritual component. You've heard that, hinted by what we're talking about here. So I believe there's a faith-based relationship with the God of the universe that made himself known in the person of Jesus. I'm all for that. And I think that a person really can't become an authorized wealth distributor distributing God's wealth and resources unless you're connected relationally to God. I see many times, and you've seen it too, you pick up the newspaper and you see some very famous person with millions of dollars die of suicide or have a problem of some major catastrophe has hit them. And I think how sad it is we've mixed up the idea of prosperity with the idea of the joy of the Lord. And you can have all the money that's available in the world and do all kinds of things and be miserable as a person. And daily you're watching people with great wealth live miserable lives. And there's no reason, because the joy, it can come from a source beyond you. And then the resources has become something that you can give away and you can help others. God's not against prosperity, but God's against selfish prosperity, where we're just caught in ourselves. And I think many times, in fact, there was one of the older stories, one of the parables in the New Testament is a young guy that was making lots of money and he kept wanting to build more and more and more barns so he could store more and more of his stuff. And Jesus spoke to him, and I think it was a guy that actually came to Jesus, not a parable. And he said, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus knew what his problem was, which was hoarding. And he said, "Sell everything you've got and give to the poor, and then follow me." And it says that in the scripture that he left depressed and down because he did not want to give away what he had accumulated. Well, life is to be transferred. If I have a cup of coffee, take this cup as an example of it. If I took a coffee pot and filled it full of coffee, and you've got one right there, okay? Now, you just took some out. Okay, that's good news, because when you take something out or distribute it, what's it allowed the person that's got the ability to pour more in to do? To fill it. God can
But
only fill your cup to the brim, and he's not going to be a wasteful God. So he's not going to give you more than you can handle. And he says, as you transfer that resource to either yourself and to other people, I can fill your cup to the brim again. But God's ability to give you an abundance is based on how you give away what you already got. So you're giving yourself away all the time, and God is resupplying. He's got an abundant supply, but Tobi, he's not going to waste it on two guys that are hoarding it all. I mean, why would he give it to you if all you're going to do is waste it? So he's looking for individuals, authorized wealth distributors that want to transfer that wealth into the hands of other people. You know, there's 100 things to give besides money. And I think a lot of times we're all hung up on, we got to give money, 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 money. Well, that is one of the things that could help. But maybe it's reprimanding, or it's correcting, or it's coaching, it's mentoring. It's spending time just listening to a person that's confused and in pain and letting them talk. That's giving time. That's giving a listening ear. You can list out 100 things easily that you could give today. And one of those things could be your financial resources. So this is not about money. It's about living a life of fulfillment. And the authorized wealth distributor is simply taking the resources that's been given to him. You know, the guy that decided to go back in business, it wasn't about the money. It was, I'd been given talents and ability to make money. So he went to work and made money. I've been able in my career, and we've raised tens of millions of dollars through my coaching and counseling and whatnot over the years. I've simply been helping people think right to where they go do their work right. But, you know, and some of these guys, they could have given much less. But when they realized they were simply stewards of what God had entrusted to them, there was one guy that decided he was going to give $100 million in his lifetime. I think he passed away a few years ago, and his family is working on the second $100 million because the company is doing very well in a very strategic niche of our economy. It's not in the United States, it's outside the United States, but they're being generous with what God gave them the ability to make. We had a 38-year-old guy that was just really raking in the money, and he realized that he sure didn't need it all. And he started giving it away. He gave $30 million over about a 5-year period. Another guy gave $48 million because he started realizing the joy of giving was really what it was all about. In these cases, it was family businesses that had done well, and they were stewards of continuing the family business. They didn't close the business. They just kept making more money, and he was just generous in giving it away. But those are nice examples. But how about when Jesus talks about the widow that came into the temple and gave two coins? And he commented that she gave more than anybody else because of her spirit of generosity. She gave it all.
Yeah.
So it's not about the money amount. Yes, I've been privileged to work with people with significant resources, but I've also worked with people that are just learning what it is to trust God with today and give it to him first. And if they don't have the money to give, how are they using their time, their resources, their phone calls, their encouragement? How are they volunteering? Time, talent, treasures, really where it's all tied into. And so, yeah, we're looking for ways to do that. And I just want people to catch on. I think probably, Tobi, a lot of the people listen to this are looking for answers of how they can make life work. And it's like, it's not working. This thing is failing right now. I've got a mess on my hands, and all I want to do is find somebody that will guide me through that mess. And I can assure you that it's not just because of the book. The book is a guidebook, in a sense, a map to living as an authorized wealth distributor. So, if the book can help anybody in your listening audience, They can go to any book outlet they got. Barnes and Noble in the United States is a big one. Books A Million is an online store. Amazon's got the largest bookstore in the world. Any place in the world you can order from Amazon. You just type in intentional living and giving, and it's going to probably pop up, and you're going to see it there. And then even Amazon gives you a good discount. So, I mean, everything works for you. It's not hard to get. And you get the book and you start to understand the core principles behind what God planned for us. And then you get into the latter half of the book, and it's how you make right decisions. How do you say no when you're being appealed to? People are always looking for you to help them. And there's criteria and evaluation that makes you really effective in your stewardship. And in the United States, on the freeway off ramps, you'll often find people with a sign that says, "I am hungry, please feed me." Or they'll have something out at the top of the ramp. I have one lady friend that said, "Well, I always carry $10 with me, so when I see those people, I can put $1 or $2 in their plate." And I responded and I said, "I never put $1 in any of those plates, because because they are not there. They may need that, but they really need different kind of help than just the food that they're going to get there." In fact, there are some real good con artists in the United States that will bring a person to an on-ramp. They're little nonprofits or they're little organizations. We'll put you there for an hour and a half. You can beg, do your thing with your sign, and then we get 30% of your take and you can have the rest of it. So we'll deliver you to an on-ramp and we'll make a profit off of you. Because what ends up happening when you sometimes respond without prudent steward thinking is you're satisfying guilt. You feel guilty about something, so your $2 relieves your guilt for a short time. And I don't want people just to be relieving guilt. I'm not saying it's bad to help somebody, but sometimes you got to make prudent decisions. So rather than me giving to an off-ramp person that's asking for food, I give to a mission that supplies food and clothing and housing for people in destitute conditions, because they're set up to do it right. And it's going to go for real food, not alcohol and drugs. So I'm making a prudent decision that my value of giving to my local mission is greater by helping them than by helping the guy on the street. Now, there was a time a few years ago where we've had little cards that says we can give these cards to the people and send them to where there's really help. A lot of people don't want that kind of help. They just want your money so they can go do something else. So anyway, I think there's prudency in doing that. And you can say thanks, but no thanks, because you're a good steward that's making judgments based on how you should use your stewardship. And how you, Tobi, use your stewardship is going to be different than how I use mine.
Of course.
So it's okay for you to be looking at things differently, but I want you to be a good steward and manage what God entrusted to you. And when you're doing that and you're becoming an authorized wealth distributor, I'm a happy camper, because I see you now multiplying and helping others do the same thing. And so, that's the essence of what we're into today here. Yes, people can be helped. We can be helped. We can become effective authorized wealth distributors, and we can be influencing the lives of other people. And sometimes that even means helping people make hard decisions that they don't want to make. I was in a group of people yesterday, and we have this one little guy that's in our class. He's probably my age, but he thinks as a much younger person, and he's in a car accident at least once or twice a year, and he's wrecking cars all the time. The reality is that somebody needs to say, we're taking your license away because you're dangerous out there. You can kill yourself, somebody else, or whatever it is. Now, I'm giving him new life by taking his license. When I did that for my father at 92, he was really angry with me because he wasn't capable of driving anymore, because he couldn't see peripheral things that were going on around him. He was a danger to the road, and he was a danger to himself. A good steward helps them transfer and figure that out. It's not negative to help a person live longer and be secure, especially when it impacts the lives of other people. And this dear guy is a great guy, but he can't figure out why people keep hitting him. Well, part of it's because he's in the wrong place at the right time. I mean, he's there and he doesn't realize what's happening. Even that, helping a person transition that is a blessing and a help to them, even though immediately that may not be how they see it, because he really wants to keep on driving, but at some point, we're kind of talking about that. What can we do to really help him? Well, if his license is gone, we need to also provide him transportation to get around. So now we've got to step in and figure out other alternatives to help him live in society where he doesn't get behind a wheel. That is helping somebody when that may not be viewed to them as help at that particular time. So a good steward is managing the affairs and watching everything go on and saying, okay, that's the right decision. We got to do this here. I chair boards of nonprofits. I'm involved in my local church as an executive, helping the stuff that nobody ever sees happen in front of the church. It's all behind the scenes. But my stewardship says I'm capable and I have knowledge in how to do that. So I need to be stepping into those places, because not everybody can spend their time reading 30 pages of an insurance policy. Okay, and most people come to church and don't know there is an insurance. They just come and watch the front of the curtain. They don't know what goes on behind the curtain to make it work. Yes, there's a authorized wealth distributor is doing all of those kind of things, Tobi. An authorized wealth distributor has the freedom to fail, has a thriving rather than surviving.
Yeah.
He's managing those curves well, and he's making decisions that impact the lives of other people. So, that's what the mirror is. When you look in the mirror, your topic of your theme is who you're seeing in the mirror today. And I'm saying, if you look right and you see it correctly and wipe off the fog, you're going to see an authorized wealth distributor potential in every single person. And that's what I want people to become. That's the essence of it, Tobi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you, and I'm so glad that you shared so much. Even what I plan to ask you, you've already answered already in the course of this conversation. And we all have that seed in us, that authorized wealth distributor is in us, and we just have to clear the fog off to be able to see it in ourselves and be good stewards of whatever has been placed in our hands. So for anyone out there who still wants to maybe ask you more questions, maybe wants to work with you, what's the best way to do this?
Well, if anybody wants to connect with me, they can go to larryonan.com. My name's got an apostrophe in it legally, but when you come to .coms, they don't like those characters, and the apostrophe makes it look Irish. It's not really Irish name, but that's what it looks like. So it's Larry Onan, LARRYONAN.com. And there's a place where you can communicate to me there. I blog there. The books are available there if you wanted a signed copy. I would encourage you can get it probably a lot faster by going to another source and go freely. There's people that may be listening and say, I think I've already got it down, but I've got a son or a daughter, or I know somebody that's really confused and is having struggles. Maybe a copy of that book would say, I want you to read this because this might help you thrive rather than survive. And many people don't know that there is a true north. If you want to think of it, that they don't know what the answer is. And maybe some of your listeners are saying, okay, I identify with being that, but people around me are not that. And so this is a way you can guide there. I think if you go on the website even now, and if persons want to, it'd be free to anybody that's doing that. You can download the book itself in a digital format onto any of your Kindles or tablets or whatever. You can download it and read it in a digital format. It's a free gift for visiting the website and joining us in that way. But sometimes good old paper book helps a person process easier. It asks the questions differently. But Tobi, I'm glad to interact. The book is easy to get, and you could contact me through larryonan.com. And I'm glad to interact. I'm one person in the world, so there's limitations, but my limitations are, how do I use my time wisely to help somebody else?
Exactly. And that's what we learned in this episode also. Thank you so much. I'm going to place the link to your website in the show note of this episode. So for everyone out there who wants to reach out to you, you should just copy the link, click on the link. And as you said, every information about your book is available on your website, and your blog posts are also there to enrich people's life and enlighten them more on how to become, authorized wealth distributors and also good stewards of their lives. Thank you so much, Larry. It has been a blessing speaking with you. I learned so much from you. Thank you.
There'll be blessings on you and your world. We're halfway around the world together, but it's fun to be with you.
Thank you very much.